Friday edition of the NBA Exchange, and this week there's been a lot of NBA news going on, a lot of things going on around the playoffs. So much to talk about and try to put this week and look ahead to the weekend in perspective. Got one of the best people covering the NBA. He is an NBA writer for SportsIllustrated.com. Howard Beck. Howard, thanks for joining me here on the NBA Exchange. How are you, man? Good to see you.
Dex, great to see you, my friend. Thanks for having me back. Or having me on. Yeah. It's the new thing. So thanks for bringing me on.
Yeah. No, thank you for joining. Always glad to read your work and hear you on your podcast with Chris Mannix. You guys do such a great job with that. But Howard, this week, this has to be one of the newsiest weeks I've ever experienced watching the NBA playoffs. So much has been going on. We've got so much stuff to get into. But let's start with last night. Game 6, Nets-Bucks. Bucks win 104-89. Big time performance by Chris Middleton, who showed up. And it seems when he shows up, the Bucks play well. Their offense looks better. Do you believe in the Bucks after this Game 6 victory, or are you still confused about this series as much as I am?
I mean, it's a hard series to gauge in large part, of course, because the Nets aren't anywhere near full strength, right? And if they were, maybe this thing would have already been over long ago. And so, the other part of it, on the Nets side, the volatility is all about who's healthy. And of course, Kevin Durant's had some dominant games and some not so dominant, or at least not by his standard. But there's so much on him. And so the Nets narrative for this series is really a lot about how much can Durant do on his own with very little around him, given Kyrie out and Harden being limited. On the Bucks side, I mean, this is a team that's at full strength and has been viewed as a contender, rightly or wrongly, for the last couple of years. And we keep waiting for that breakthrough. And, look, if not for the Kyrie and Harden injuries, and Harden in particular, again, this thing's maybe already over. And so we're once again seeing some of the limitations of the Bucks. So I think you asked this, if it's confusing. The confusion, I think, if there is any, is about who are the Bucks? Is this team legit or not? Are they a championship contender or not? Is Giannis a guy who can carry a team to the finals and to the title? And what we saw last night was a really interesting kind of inversion. Kendrick Perkins on ESPN this morning was talking about Giannis played Robin to Chris Middleton's Batman. And when I first saw that, I went I cringed a little bit, because here's Giannis, a 2-time MVP, and that sounds almost kind of like an insult, but I don't think Perk meant it that way. I think he just meant Giannis recognized that their best way forward, their advantage right now, is that Middleton's got a more diverse skill set in the half court. He can shoot from a bunch of different places that Giannis cannot, at least not accurately. And so Giannis cut all the threes out. That was a good move for him. He attacked when he could, when the time was right, as he should. He's a battering ram. And Middleton did the rest, and especially in the half court. And so, they're a team that, in part, they're still, I think, trying to figure out the right formula, the right balance in terms of their offense, but also they have some wild swings. And the other key stat here that was, obviously all over the place last night was Middleton's home road splits in this series, and I think in the playoffs period, but especially in this series, are just dramatic. And so can they win it? Well, Game 7 is in Brooklyn. Can Chris Middleton play like it's a home game? Because if he puts up the kind of performance and the efficiency that he has in Milwaukee in a Game 7 in Brooklyn, then the Bucks have a chance. And if Middleton doesn't, it's weird to say this, that their fate rests in the hands of their second best player instead of their 2-time MVP. But it feels like that's the case.
Yeah, it does feel like that's the case. And if you looking ahead to Game 7, which will be coming up on Saturday, in terms of for the Nets, you can say Chris Middleton played very well. The Bucks offense looked much better than it did in Game 5. And you talked about the home road splits for Chris Middleton. But for the Nets, they might just want to chalk this up as we're starting to get a little more comfortable with Harden on the court. We didn't shoot the ball particularly well, especially from 3 in this Game 6. Do you think they should be confident heading into a Game 7 at home, even though they're banged up?
I mean, the Nets should be confident because they've got the best player in the series and, quite likely, arguably the best player, I would say the best player left in the playoffs right now. I'm not going to do that thing where every year, as soon as LeBron's out, we start declaring a new best player in the NBA, period. LeBron, when healthy, is still the best player in the NBA, I believe. But Kevin Durant's the best player in the playoffs right now. And the Nets should feel confident because they have him, because Harden looked a little bit better in Game 6 than he did in Game 5. you don't know who on a given night of their role players is going to give you 20 or 22 maybe. Is it, Jeff Green? Is Landry Shamet going to get hot? Blake Griffin? There's some volatility there just around the edges, but Durant, we've seen, can absolutely just dominate in this series. And if he can replicate some of Game 5 and Game 7, this thing's probably over. But if the Bucks on their side of it, they should have some more confidence now. They've really rallied in this series, and yes, it's been better at home than on the road. But I think that they've shown that they have the talent to hang in this series, especially given the Nets' limitations. The other thing too is that with Harden, every game he plays, I think the natural assumption for us as viewers is to say, well, his first game back from the hamstring, pretty limited. It's very clear, but he'll get better as he goes. And then Game 6, he was in fact a little better, I think, than in Game 5. The thing is, though, the hamstring is still injured, and He did rush back, and so it's not a guarantee that he's going to get better as the series goes on. He could get worse because the hamstring could just get inflamed. So, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trainer, but I think it's reasonable to believe that an injury that is not healed is not going to be improving the more he plays on it. So I just think that that's a caveat to put on whatever we expect out of Harden in a Game 7. I don't think we should expect he's going to make some other leap forward. Maybe he does, or maybe it's the same as Game 6, or maybe it's more like Game 5 where he looked like really super limited. And the Bucks seem to be getting smarter about trying to take advantage of that.
So if you had to make a prediction, Howard, for Game 7, I don't know how you feel about making predictions. Some people don't love doing them, but
I hate making predictions.
You hate making predictions. I'll put you on the spot anyway. Who are you taking? Nets or Bucks in Game 7?
It's part of the business. We get asked to do this, and then we ask each other to do this. I'll say I hate making predictions, but then the next time I do a podcast, I'll ask somebody else to do it. It's paying it backwards, I guess, or something. Paying
it backwards, yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, if I had to pick, I would say the Nets. But if I'm being honest, I picked the Bucks before the postseason even started. I picked the Bucks to come out of the East, so I should be being consistent in picking the Bucks. But the way this series has gone, I'm not sure if I have the confidence in them to win a Game 7 in Brooklyn right now.
Fair enough. Can understand that absolutely for sure here. Now, this morning, some other news breaks, unexpected. Trade season started up again. We didn't even know this was going to happen. Kemba Walker traded from the Celtics to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't know if this came as much of a surprise because we knew Kemba Walker's health. The Celtics might be looking at this. This is Brad Stevens' first trade as general manager here. Just want to bring up the details of the trade here. Celtics traded Kemba Walker, the number 16 overall pick in the 2021 draft, this year's draft, 2025 second-round draft pick to OKC for Al Horford, Moses Brown, and a 2023 second-round pick. What do you make of this move for the Celtics and also for the Thunder? We know they're stockpiling draft picks, but what do you think the plan is here for both teams?
I mean, obviously, the more interesting part of this is for the Celtics because this is a team that has been hovering in that contender range. Maybe they're a contender, maybe they're not. They slipped a little, but they've got one of the best 1-2 wing combos in the NBA in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And trying to find the right assortment around them has been a challenge for the Celtics. But a lot of this, of course, the last couple of years of struggles has been not who they have, but who they've lost, right? They lost Gordon Hayward. They lost Al Horford not so long ago. And excuse me, so they've just had this talent drain. And then Kemba was he the right fit? I mean, I think there were a little bit of fit issues with Kemba as an offensive-minded point guard who wants the ball in his hands a lot with two other guys, especially Jason Tatum, who needs the ball in his hands a lot, and especially when they had Gordon Hayward there, another guy who functions well with the ball in his hands a lot. And yet that was the best version of the Celtics of the last few years, was when they had all those guys because they had so much versatility. The real issue with Kemba, to me, is some combination of the continuous knee issues, which obviously have plagued him the last couple of seasons, and his salary and the limitations it placed on the Celtics. So I don't think this is so much about, well, Kemba doesn't fit with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Maybe there's a better fit, but he was okay fit. He was fine. Like, he brought a lot to the table. It's more to me about the fact that his health has been a concern. His salary is a problem. And in making this trade, they've given themselves a little bit more flexibility in the salary cap. Maybe that means they now have the ability to re-sign Evan Fournier, whose bird rights they have after acquiring him midseason from the Magic. without having to worry about triggering the luxury tax. So it could be that, could be other moves. And bringing Al Horford back has its own advantages, right? Like, this is a team that has really struggled with its interior defense and just at the center position, period. Now, granted, they're bringing back an older version of Al Horford, but this is a really smart guy, great locker room guy, obviously somebody who Brad Stevens has a great deal of faith in and did as coach and leaned on a lot as a leader in that locker room. And now Brad Stevens as team president, bringing Al Horford in, knowing that whoever Brad Stevens hires to be the next Brad Stevens can now rely on Al Horford to do some of the same, great things in the locker room as a leader. So I think bringing Horford back is a win. I think freeing up some cap room is a win. They do now have a major hole once again at point guard.
Yes, they do. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Moving on to some news around another team. A lot of news coming out this week of reports in The Athletic about the dysfunction around the Dallas Mavericks. Rick Carlisle out yesterday as Mavericks head coach after 13 years on the job. Were you shocked about this with everything that's going on? And what do you think is going on around with the Mavericks? Are they going to be able to keep Luka happy? Seems like a lot's going on down there, and there's going to be a lot of changes in Dallas.
Yeah, already are. I mean, look, Donnie Nelson had been running basketball ops there for however many years it's been.
I think it was 24 years, Howard. 24
years with the organization.
Right.
Some of that, his dad was obviously there too. Don Nelson was there. But the Nelsons together, Don Nelson and Donnie Nelson in combination, one or the other or both have been there since 1997, and now there are no Nelsons. This is the first Nelson-less version of the Dallas Mavericks that Mark Cuban has presided over, because they were there when he got there. And so that's a major change. This would be, it's not the equivalent in terms of stature, but this would be the equivalent of Pat Riley retiring and maybe taking Eric Spoelstra with him, right? If the entire way that we identify the Miami Heat's operation, or say the Spurs with Pop and R.C. Buford, if those guys were gone tomorrow, you'd say, well, this is a completely different Spurs franchise. We don't know what the Spurs are without Pop and R.C. Buford. We don't know what the Miami Heat are anymore without Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra and others in that front office that have been Riley's guys. That's how big of a seismic change this is for the Dallas Mavericks. No Donnie Nelson, and now no Rick Carlisle, who was one of the longest tenured coaches in the league, and of course was the coach for their championship in 2011. This is a big deal. No underplaying this whatsoever. And Mark Cuban, for the first time since he's owned the team, really has to pick new leadership. What's going on behind the scenes? It seems like there's a lot of different things. Obviously, the Athletic story focused a lot on Bob Voulgaris, the former professional gambler, who is now a big part of their brain trust in a title role that I'm not exactly clear on. It's analytics and strategy and whatever, but that his voice had become so big and his influence so big that it was rubbing a lot of people the wrong way, apparently including Donnie Nelson, perhaps including Rick Carlisle, apparently including Luka Doncic. These are major concerns for the Mavericks. The good news is Luka's just finished year 3 of his rookie deal. He's eligible for a $200 million and something extension this summer that he's already said he's going to take, that he'll take, because nobody ever returns down their first extension off of their rookie deal if you're a superstar coming off your rookie deal in this league. So the good news is they've got an MVP caliber player to keep building around. The bad news is they have a lot to figure out at the front office and coaching level before they even get to, this roster needs some serious work too.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to be done there. Dallas going to have to be keeping an eye on that. But let's look at the games tonight, Howard. Couple of game 6s where the teams on the road have a chance to, the home teams, have a chance to close it out. The teams on the road, being the higher seeds, probably thought they wouldn't be in this position. Let's start with Philly at Atlanta first in that series, the Sixers and the Hawks. I guess the first question is, when you look at the last game, the Sixers blowing a 26-point lead, what the hell is going on in Philadelphia? It seems like they can't score, they can't get anything done. Do you think their confidence is shot, or are they ready to win this game 6 here tonight?
Isn't it funny how every playoff series going on right now, and even I think in the first round, we've got a lot of what the hells. There's lot
yes.
of what the hell happened to the Clippers? Why are they down 0-2? Why are they facing elimination? Oh, well, they came back, and what the hell's going on with the Sixers right now? What the hell's going on with the Bucks? Everything, nothing makes any sense. We just need to get through the rest of this. I don't know what's going to happen the next few weeks, the finals, everything else. Just finish the season. Could we just fast forward to October and have a normal season that starts on time, finishes on time, is not interrupted by quarantines and testing and everything else, and then we can maybe stop saying what the hell so much.
I'm here for that. Just for the record, I'm here for that.
Yeah. I don't know. You know what? I mean, it's made for an interesting postseason landscape, right? And I think the good news is we have mystery for once. This is not the years of Cavs and Warriors just battling it out year after year, or who's LeBron taking to the finals this year. So that part of it's good. We have some suspense. I like suspense. What the hell's wrong with the Sixers? I think the Sixers, I mean, one, there's the obvious. Joel Embiid's partially torn meniscus, I think, is limiting him some, though he's put up big numbers. I don't think he's quite the same, and we've seen him fade a bit late in games. Is that fatigue? Is that the knee? Is that the Hawks defense? Some combination of things. So that's been an issue. But we've also just seen that functionally, the things that some of us have always labeled as concerns for the Sixers are rearing their ugly heads in this series, right? Ben Simmons, can't rely on him down the stretch because he can't shoot free throws. He's going to get hacked, which the Hawks have been doing quite a bit. And he's not going to take an open jumper and probably can't make an open jumper. So the limitations of Ben Simmons as your lead facilitator are hurting you right now. And the thing there was always, Joel Embiid's your go-to guy. Somebody's got to get him the ball. So there's that concern. And then it's, Tobias Harris can actually do a little of everything, right? He can handle, he can post, he can shoot. So maybe it's Tobias Harris. Maybe the answer to the who do you go to down the stretch of a tight playoff game is Tobias. Well, Tobias Harris hasn't exactly carried that responsibility in this series either. And so all the things that were functionally concerning for them have come back to haunt them. And this Hawks team, look, I know we're all a little surprised because the Hawks haven't been in the playoffs in a long time, and it's a really young team, but it's a really young and really talented team, a really deep team. And this potential was always there. It was always a question of when it was all going to come together and they were going to make that leap. Well, it turns out it was sooner than expected and bigger than expected, but the talent's incredible. Their confidence is through the roof, and that's all embodied in Trae Young. Trae Young has been absolutely fantastic in this postseason. He has been a revelation for people who didn't know what talent was there before. And I think even for those of us, like I believed in Trae Young, but the playoffs are different. And usually you got to go through it a little bit and get knocked down a couple of times. Trae Young's not going through the get knocked down stage. He's just like, I'm here now, deal with me. And that's been a lot of fun. From that first round series against the Knicks through this first 5 games of this series against the Sixers, Trae Young has shown that he belongs in the conversation with the rest of the superstars of this league. He's a big game player. He's got a lot of swagger, a lot of confidence. He's a great passer as well. It's not just about the deep threes and the timely shots that he makes. It's about how well he gets his teammates involved too. And so the Hawks are a real threat. Like, this is a thing now. And I would have said that before they went up 3-2. Can they close it out at home? I believe they can. You're probably going to ask me to make a prediction.
No, I was, and you got ahead of that, and that was good. But I think you also made my producer Greg smile because he picked the Hawks in 6, and that could happen tonight. And you think they can close it out. So that's good to hear. I know he's smiling about that. Now, on to the Western Conference game that we have tonight. I think for a lot of people, watching that Game 5 between the Clippers and the Jazz, Kawhi's out. I don't think many people gave the Clippers a shot, but we saw the reemergence of playoff P. Howard. Not way off P, not pandemic P, playoff P was here and came up with a big-time performance. So the question then goes, are the Jazz going to stay alive, or do the Clippers, for the second consecutive series in a row, fall down 0-2, win 4 straight, and move on to the Western Conference Finals? Do you think they're able to do that tonight?
Somebody asked me a couple days ago after Kawhi was declared out, can they win this series without him? I said, absolutely, positively not. That's how little faith at that point I had in Paul George. And by the way, playoff P might be the absolute worst name that anybody's ever come up with for themselves. And that's not just in basketball, but maybe in the history of the universe. It's just playoff P. Like, P is not a strong letter, right? Like, X is a cool letter. Z, D maybe. There's a couple
D can be not P. P's not a strong letter.
No,
I agree.
No, and I'm sorry. I know he's not Ixal George or Zal George, so he can't just take somebody else's letter. He's Paul. Like, he didn't give himself that name. If he's going to be playoff something, but playoff PG would have been fine. Playoff something, but like P it's a soft letter. It does not. It's not exactly the Black Mamba. Let's just say that.
Not even in the same stratosphere. I would happen to agree with that. Not at all. Not at all.
No. On the nickname alone, I end up losing faith.
So we never know which Paul George we're going to get, right? And we have now seen the version of him that's much closer to what we used to see in Indiana when he was anchoring those teams that were going toe-to-toe with LeBron James's Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. Paul George as second banana, I think, has struggled at times. We've seen that. And Paul George certainly in the bubble struggled. And, I don't think people should have piled on him at the time for that. The bubble was difficult for a lot of people. And I appreciate that Paul George spoke openly about the mental health strain of the whole bubble experience. But when Kawhi goes down, do I think Paul George can carry the Clippers without him? No, I had my doubts because we haven't seen that version of Paul George very often the last couple of years. Dominant, assertive, basically saying, I'm going to put the team on my back. But all the skills are there, right? Paul George is still an All-NBA, not just All-NBA caliber. I think he just made All-NBA again. He's got the skill set, the ball handling, the shooting, the defense, and he knows how to score at a high level. So now we've seen that version of Paul George again. We have to assume Kawhi Leonard is not back in this series. He may not be back in this postseason, even if the Clippers advance, depending on how severe that ACL is. Can Paul George do it with, I don't want to say alone, but Paul George plus Reggie Jackson plus, Morris, Terrence Mann, whoever steps up on a given night? Is that possible? I mean, maybe they get past the Jazz because Donovan Mitchell is also ailing and because Mike Conley has not played to date and they're trying to get him back in. But are the Jazz just banged up enough themselves that a Paul George-centered offense with the Clippers can get past them? Yeah, maybe. But I don't see the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard beating the Phoenix Suns. I think whatever happens in this Clippers Jazz series, the end of the road's coming soon for the Clippers unless Kawhi Leonard comes back.
I think that's pretty fair to say there in that accord. Now, just in this Game 6, Howard, Clippers or Jazz, who are you trusting? I know you don't want to necessarily bank on the Clippers, and the Jazz have their injuries, as you mentioned, with Donovan Mitchell and his ankle. But who are you going with in this Game 6?
The hedge is it depends on whether or not Donovan Mitchell can play at any sort of level and whether Mike Conley plays. It looks like, they might both be out there for the first time in a while. If they're both playing, then I think the Jazz are getting back in this. If those guys are limited, the Clippers might just be closing this thing out.
Going to be interesting to see what happens in that Game 6 as well. Now, you talked about this earlier, Howard. You said this has been obviously a crazy season. It's not been your typical predictable NBA postseason. It is up for grabs. Anybody can win this, and we've also kind of seen anything can happen. We've seen that as well, too. Who do you like in a prediction to win the NBA championship? I'm sorry, Howard. I got to ask you one last prediction before I get you out of here. Who is winning the 2021 NBA championship?
I mean, I hate making predictions even in a normal year. Like this is torture. And the funny thing is, I love the suspense of the fact that we don't really have a clear favorite left on the board, but I don't like the reason we don't have a clear favorite. The reason we don't have a clear favorite is because the Nets are missing Kyrie Irving and James Harden is at 20% of normal James Harden. We don't have a favorite because Conley and Donovan Mitchell are banged up. We don't have a favorite because Chris Paul is in COVID protocols. We don't have a favorite because Kawhi Leonard has potentially a torn ACL. Like it sucks to look. The Bucks are the only team that's seemingly fully healthy, and obviously the Sixers have the Embiid knee issues. So suspense good, injuries bad, injuries to stars bad, and out of all those teams I just named, I'm not sure I trust any of them. If you're going with talent alone, it's the Nets if they're healthy. If you're going on who's just the most whole, who can actually get through this in one piece, it starts to look like Bucks Suns. And by the way, on top of all of that, because the Hawks are actually up in the series and the Sixers are kind of, looking a little bit just bumpy right now. Things aren't looking great for the Sixers. Like Hawks Suns, Hawks somebody is on the table. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not putting the Atlanta Hawks in the finals. I'm just saying it's on the table. Crazier things have happened. Crazier things might still happen. If I had to pick right now, I think I'm going Suns over Bucks in the finals, but ask me again in 5 minutes and I'll probably give you a different answer.
5 minutes, you might change your answer. It's not waffling at all. My producer Greg is going to be happy that you think there's even a shot the Suns can get to the finals. Who knows, Howard? Anything can happen.
KG said it. KG told us anything is possible.
That was a great KG impression. Anything is absolutely possible. That is Howard Beck, senior writer for SI.com, also the co-host of the Crossover NBA podcast. Howard, thank you for joining the NBA Exchange for the first time.
Thanks, Dex. Always a pleasure, my friend.